We start. This time we are very on time. Sorry about last time. So welcome to the second lecture of TEMO. This week we're in the library. So we have a slightly different program than last week. And just to start, just to remember what we did last week, we went through the whole program and we had an overview. And then we have the theoretical lecture on the first part of the curriculum. And then we had some practical information at the end. And first of all, we would like to thank you all for your feedback, which was really appreciated. And we went through it, and we realized that there was a slight mistake in the curriculum because we have asked you to work with the SWOT in the afternoon, but the SWOT is for next time. So actually, what we're going to do today is that we're going to I'm going to make an example on how to work with the SWOT in the Sunday case, and then next week we will do it more in depth, as it was supposed to be in the curriculum. And then another comment we got was a question of why we're using an iceberg as the background here, and especially why we're using penguins. And there is actually a reason for both of these things. We're using the iceberg because during your technical education as engineers, you're really focusing on technology, so you're usually focusing on the part of the iceberg that is above the water. But what we would like to give you with this course is a better understanding of what's happening behind the technology. So everything that usually is under the water, as in the iceberg metaphor. And the reason why we use penguins is not just because there were penguins in the background, but it's because penguins work together, or they live together and they spend their lives in communities, which polar bears do not. Now there is no polar bear, but there is one in the Pretzi. So we decided to use the penguins just to make a connection with engineers, because when you will be working in an organization, you will be working with other engineers and also with other type of people that you need to get along with. So we will go back to the Pretzi later today when we will do the wrap-up. And one thing that we would like you to use the Pretzi for is to actually go back to what we did during the day and try to position it on the iceberg or on the overview. So you have the link for the Pretzi. It was sent on CampusNet, and every week I actually upload it. So I actually add videos and stuff. So when you work with the Pretzi, what you can do is you can click on the bottom, there are arrows, and then you go on with the slides the way I show them during the day, but you can actually also zoom on specific part of the Pretzi. So if you want to watch, for example, the engineering, the guy from Georgia Tech, at the beginning you just click on the video and then it zooms and then you can watch the video and so on. It's a good idea sometimes to go and have a look at it, because we always put extra videos in, something that can be inspirational or something that can help you learn the theory as well. So just to tell you a little bit about today, we will start with a theoretical lecture, which will be an introduction to the business model and to the technique of case analysis, because that will be the topic of today's talk show. We have Ate Kearney coming today with two presenters. And then we have Caspar, who will interview them in the talk show. And also consider that the talk show is not just about Caspar asking questions, but it's also all of you. So if during the presentation you have questions that you would like to ask, then note them down, and there will be the possibility for you to be part of the talk show afterwards. And finally, we will have a wrap-up, where we will try to take what was told during the talk show, during the presentation and during the questions, and we will try to place it into the curriculum. So we will help you connect the very practical thing that we will talk about with Ate Kearney today with what you have in the theory. And we will have 2 breaks in between. So I think we can start with the business model canvas. And again, we have technical issues, so I wanted to show you a video. And we don't have the sound, so I will put the video on and then I'll talk on it. It actually has subtitles, so if I can get my arrow back there, then we can open it up. How many of you have seen this commercial? It's a very old one. It's the very first Nespresso commercial. Okay, so what I like about this commercial is that it's not only an advertisement for Nespresso, but it actually shows you a lot of different aspects of the business model behind Nespresso. So besides having George, which always helps, and that's one of the reasons why I always show him in class, but you can see how Nespresso works. You can see the capsules, you can see the machines, you can see the shops, and if we had the audio, you could also hear everything about the customer and the type of target that they want to address. Because what they are talking about in the video, and now I'm going to close this, is that the Nespresso is actually it's rich and it's intense and it's a great experience. So they're actually defining their customer target in the spot while they're telling you about the product. So just the first quiz to warm up a little bit. Why is Nespresso business model so successful? Is it because it targets high-end customers? Is it because it cooperates with the right partners? Is it because it owns the patents for the technology, so the machines and the capsules, or is it all of it? What do you think? A? How many thinks it's A? One? How many thinks it's B? No one? C? 1, 2, 3 hands. And how many thinks it's all of the above? Most of you. So you read the case for today. That's really good. Why is that? Is there anyone who wants to give it a shot to explain why it's all of them and why is it so successful? No. So I'll just do it myself for now. So basically, if we look at the business model canvas. What the business model canvas does is to break down a way an organization works and a way it makes money and it creates costs. So a way it produces their product and makes money by interacting with the customer. So if you take the business model canvas of Nespresso, you can see all the 9 building blocks. And we start with the value proposition in the beginning. And the value proposition of Nespresso is to offer a coffee that is quick to make at home. It tastes like you are in a cafe. It gives you a great experience as if you were in this super fancy, exclusive place. And it's quite easy to get access to. So what they connect the value proposition with is the high-end customers. So they actually target it to people who want to live this kind of experience. And to create the connection with the high-end customers, they have very strong customer relationship that they work with a club and with the membership to the shop. So basically, if you are a member of the Nespresso club, you can use the card to go in the shop and just get coffee every time you want for free. How many of you buy Nespresso here? Not so many, but how many of you know someone who buys Nespresso or uses Nespresso? Yes, and one of the reasons why this works or why it had become so successful is also the channel. So they have opened these very fancy shops where they sell the very nice design coffee machines. And the machines are actually quite cheap, so you can buy them for a limited price. What is actually really expensive, if you compare it to other types of coffee, is the capsules. And they have the patents for the capsule, for the technology behind it. So they actually connect the part of the business model that relates to their customer with what they have behind. Because they have as key activities the production of the coffees, they have as key resources, the patents behind the technology, and as key partners, they have the producers or the manufacturers of the machines that actually sell the machines so cheap just because the capsule are then sold by Nespresso. And then they have the cost of producing the capsule and distributing the capsule and the marketing and, of course, paying George every year to do a new commercial. And then they have the revenue that they get from the customers buying the capsule. So what they're doing here is that they are creating a business model that not only targets customers that actually want to live that experience and want to buy that coffee, but also support it with the right activities, resources, and partners. And especially they make sure that the flow of income, the flow of money that they make by selling the capsules is enough to cover their costs. So if we look at the business model canvas, we can actually see it as a theater where we have the value proposition in the middle, and that's the product, that's what we are offering to the market. Then we have the backstage, so it's everything behind the product. In the case of Nespresso, as we said, it's the manufacturing of the capsule, it's the partners, it's the patents. And then you have the front stage, which is everything that links your product, your value proposition with the market. So if we focus, so whenever we start working with the business model, we start in the middle with the value proposition. So even if you have a great idea for a new product and you start with the technology, so you start by developing, for example, the capsules and the machine for the Nespresso, then you need to see, is this something that someone would want to buy? So you start working with the value proposition. And you need to find a fit between your technology, your product, and your customer. So to do that, we can use something that's called a value proposition canvas, which connects the characteristics of the product and the characteristics of the customers, the needs and expectations of the customer. So whatever type of customer you can have out there, depending on your product, they will experience pains, gains, and they will have a customer jobs to do. The pain means that there's something that bothers them that they don't like so much. Then they will have gains, so something that they want to benefit from by buying your product, and then they have a customer job, so something that they need to get done. And your product is supposed to offer something that relieves their pain, create gains for them, and allows them to perform their jobs. So if and we will go back to this in a bit when we will talk about case analysis. So once we have designed our value proposition and we've looked at, okay, how do we connect with our customers, we actually go backstage and see what do we have that will support our business model. And one way to do that is to look at the profitability or at the potential of the resources we have. This is a picture, it's an example from Denmark, and it's something that comes out of a machine that does hydrostatic shaping. And it does it through an orbital welding machine. Yes, and the key characteristics of this is that it can produce valves that don't have any sharp edges. And that is very good for the food industry and, for instance, for milk. Because when you have these valves and you have these long tubes, you need to be able to clean them very well in between production. And if you don't have any sharp edges, that's very easy. What you can do with this, what is important about this example is that their key resource is not only the actual machine, but it's the ability to use the machine. This company is the only one in Denmark that can produce valves like this. And it's the only one that has someone who is actually able to operate this machine. So what they have done is that they have built, what they do is that they produce, they use this machine to produce the valve. And they build a business model around that. So they have the customers in the food industry, especially with milk. And then they use their key resource, their knowledge, how to operate the machine to create a strong business model and make sure their customers are happy and they can make money with their product. Another example that we had last semester in one of the talk shows, we had a company that's called AAK. And what they do is they produce fat for different purposes, from lubricant for this big saw machines to take down trees, to fat that you have in the food industry. And they have an important project going on where they're actually working with shea butter from Africa. And so their suppliers are a group of women that actually go out in the fields and collect the shea nuts. And what these women are is not just a key resource because they are, or it's not just a key partner because they are the supplier of the shea butter for the company, but they are actually built into the business model to be a key resource because they are actually helping the company to constantly improve the way they acquire and they work with the shea butter. So these are two different examples on how you can work with the part off stage of your business model to actually improve the way you connect with your customers. Another thing that is important to look at when you look at business model is business model patterns. So we can have different types of business models depending on what you're focusing more on. Are you focusing more on the type of the type of relationship that you have with your customers? Are you focusing more on your cost and revenue flows? So what they did and what's in your Osterwalder's book is that they made a collection of cases to characterize what are different business models that you can find in the market. And the first one that they describe is the unbundling business model. And an example of this is when we have, for example, telecommunication companies that sell the infrastructure for you to be able to talk on the phone. And what some companies do, TDC does it in Denmark, for example, is they don't only offer you the infrastructure, but they also offer you the content. So when you pay for have your month abonnement for your phone, you also get access to Netflix, to HBO, and you can choose which type of content you would like to have. So what TDC is doing is bundling its business model, is putting together two different products into one. The communication, so the ability to talk on the phone, and the content, so the ability to actually not only surf the internet, but also have access to content that you would have to pay separately otherwise. What they can do is also unbundle the business model and say, no, our customers only want to talk on the phone, or we would like to target old people and they don't watch Netflix. So we unbundle the business model and we offer the possibility to just buy the communication, the talking time, or to just buy the content. The second business model pattern that is described in the book is the long tail. And an example of this is Amazon. What Amazon does, it sells some products to a lot of people, and it sells a lot of products that are very niche, so that only a few people will buy. And I have an example of this type of product at the end of the lecture in the wrap-up, so I'll actually ask you to make an exercise with those. But we will come back to these niche products at the end of the long tail. Then we have multi-sided platforms, and the particularity about this is that they connect two parts of the market that couldn't exist otherwise. So if you think about, last time we talked a lot about Apple. If you think about the app, the App Store that you have in your phone, in there you have free parties. You have the Apple who's providing the platform, you have the software developers, and then you have the end user, the customers that buy the app. And without the app developers, that business model wouldn't work, because Apple would have to develop everything themselves, and probably the cost would be higher than the revenues. But by having separate or third parties, app developers that work on the development of the apps themselves, they can actually put together a business model that is successful and that allows them to make money. Then we have the freemium business models, which is when you basically get a product for free and then you can pay to get an extra service. And an example of this is the Prezi that I used for the overview last week, because you can actually use Prezi for free, but if you want to have a special characteristic or special services, for example, the possibility to work offline or the possibility to be different people working on the same Prezi, then you actually need to pay a monthly fee. And there are a lot of examples of freemium services or business models. And the last one is the open innovation or the open business models. And an example of this is Innocentive, which became really successful because what they did was doing open consulting. So companies would post a problem on the Innocentive platform, and then consultants or people from all over could actually contribute to providing a solution to these problems. And what the incentive does is that they connect the customers with the consultants and makes money out of this connection. And another example of open business model is Xerox, who actually created a lot of small companies. First, they were very unsuccessful in working with open innovation, but then they created a way to use new ideas that they couldn't use themselves and actually spin them off or sell them to make money out of it. So the idea behind this is everything. It's not only that if I don't have competences in-house, then I buy a license from the outside, but it's also that I can sell the licenses that I'm not using. So if you look at Apple or Microsoft, they have a huge amount of patents for a lot of technology, and many of them are not fitted to their business model. So what they do is they sell them, and by selling them, they make money out of things that they couldn't use themselves, and that's exactly what Xerox did. They created an incubator where entrepreneurs or people within the company with good ideas could develop their new technology or new products, and then the ones that didn't fit with a Xerox business model, they sold, so they could make money out of it. So these are the 5 business model patterns that are described in the book, and that you can use to inspire yourself when you're designing a new business model. And the last part that was to prepare for today is about business model design. And this is a picture of visual mapping, which is one of the tools that you can use to design a business model. And I'm not going to talk about all the different tools that you can use because they're explained very clearly in the book. And the way you can use them is when you're working with your reports. So when you are in the afternoon working with case analysis, or when you're working with the challenge in the second part of the course. There is one part that is about proposing a new solution and proposing an implementation for that solution. To come up with those solutions, you can actually use the tools that you have in the book on business model design, especially if you're working with a business model canvas. So it will give you different ideas of which exercises can you do with your colleagues in the group to develop a new business model to propose to the companies that you're working with. So this was the theoretical part that was related to the business model canvas. Can we take 1 minute where you talk to your neighbor if there is anything that I didn't cover, or if you have any questions that you would like to ask at this point? Or 1 minute, actually someone wrote in the feedback 1 minute is not enough, so we take 2 minutes. So, yes, and for those of you who are not here, you can use Twitter or the streaming window to ask questions. So Was this a little better time-wise? I hope so. Are there any questions? Yes?
I studied the book. They write from analysts' point of view that they're all going to find their customers and set up some discussions, and from discussion come to a decision.
What?
You need to. The guys from the audio, can you turn on the throwing mic, and then? But you also need to speak in the black.
All right.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. This is when I studied the book, I found out that from a customer view and discussion with the customer, they can set up some solution. But I was not able to really find out how they manage their discussions and how they create flow of decisions between different parts of this organization, or we call a structure. Mm-hmm. How they come from discussion to some point of analysis, and how they can create the flow of decisions into the structure so they can find a solution.
Yes.
That's my problem.
What you can work with is when you talk to your customers, for example, you can use some of the tools that they have in the business model design to actually break down what your customer wants. So you see, okay, our customers say they like good coffee, they like the experience of being in a cafe, but they don't always want to go to the cafe and pay a lot of money and sit down and so on. So how can we solve this? And then it's up to you to come up, or it's up to the company to come up with a solution that answers that customer need. And you do that by making brainstorm and by connecting with the different people that you have in your organization. So you will typically have someone in the research and development, and you will have someone in the marketing department. And the marketing department would know more about your customers and will have a direct connection to them, while the people in the research and development will know a lot about technology and about the production characteristics. So what you do is you sit them together and you ask them to work together and to find a shared solution. And this is the tricky part. So in the second part of the course, when we talk about the STAR model, we will also look into the different ways that you can organize the structure or the processes to facilitate this. So in the Business Model Canvas book, or in the business model literature, they don't actually tell you how to link what your customers say with how you should work. No, but so you have to think that the book is a tool to work with the business model itself. So if you want to work, or if you want to learn how to turn your customer insight into an actual product, then you need to go into marketing literature, and that would be a completely different course that we are not doing here. But here we are teaching you how to work with the business model. So if you look at the value proposition canvas, for example, this is a tool that you can use to break down what your customers say and try to offer them a product that fits. So what you do is you map the gains, the pains, and the customer jobs, and then you see, I have a technology. Does this solve anything? In a moment, when we move on to the technique of case analysis, I will actually show you how to do the value proposition in the case of mobile life, so then I can explain in more detail how this works. Are there other questions? Yes, we have one in the back. We had a feedback that we shouldn't be throwing this, but we will keep on doing it, so please help. We also had feedback that we should keep on throwing the mic. So.
Is it on?
Yes, thank you.
Hi. You were talking about bundling, and
yes.
You gave an example with TDC and how they bundled their products.
Yes.
But from the literature, I understood the unbundling as you recognize that you have 3 different types of companies,
yes.
and then you outsource or make somebody else do the other 2.
Yes.
And putting Netflix into your product, wouldn't that be embracing that you're a customer relationship?
Yes. So what they are doing at TDC is they're doing the opposite thing that they describe in the book. So they have an unbundled they had an unbundled business model because they were only providing the infrastructure. And then they decided to add something to it because they thought their customer target would wanna have that. So they bundled it with the content together. Right? So you're completely right. What the book talks about is when you have something, or when you have different types of companies in one, as you said, so focusing on the customer relationships or on the technology, and then you separate them. If we think about the Nespresso, if Nespresso was producing the machines themselves, then they could unbundle and either sell the machines for a very high price or keep the capsules. But then they will have actually competing products. So you need to think, okay, where do I want to go and how do I want to handle my business model? Does it make sense? Yes? Other questions? You can keep it and throw it back when someone has a question.
I can keep it.
Okay. Then, if you don't have any specific questions about the business model canvas, then we move on to the technique of case analysis. And as we talked about last time, the technique of case analysis is the tool that we teach you in TEMO to actually support problem solving within organizations. And if you go through the document that you have on CampusNet, it describes the aim of case analysis, and it's also related to the learning objective of the course. So the aim of case analysis is to be able to select relevant theories and models from the curriculum that are related to a specific managerial problem. So we have a problem here that we're going to work with. And you need to be able to select the right theory and models to work with that problem. Then you need to be able to combine these theories together. So what we are teaching you is a series of frameworks, a series of models. And we are connecting them to build a story. But when you work with case analysis, you have to connect them yourselves. So we are just giving you examples of how you can connect the different models together. For instance, this morning I talked about the business model canvas, and I say you can go on stage by working with the value proposition, and you can go backstage by looking at the profitability of your resources. And that's the type of combining that you need to be doing yourself. So taking different models to actually explain a problem and explaining its causes. And then you need to be able to present an analysis of causes that has a coherent link with the recommended solution. If you remember last time we talked about the fact that the first job of a manager is to create value, and you can do it by ensuring organizational performance or by creating competitive advantage. If the problem that you decide to work on is linked to competitive advantage, for example, our customers are picking up with us, they are making better and better products, so in a few years they can produce the same quality as us at a cheaper price, that's a competitive advantage issue. If your solution is to create a new department and change the structure from functional to divisional, that's not coherent because they don't match together. A way to work with that type of problem would be to say, okay, what kind of product or what kind of offering can we make so that we can keep up with our competitors and keep our customers happy and keep our market share? And then reflect if we need to implement this product. What are the organizational processes? Which structures do we need? Which departments do we need to change? So you're still linking the organizational performance and the competitive advantage, but you need to be coherent in the way you work with it. So, when you're working with case analysis, you're working with case stories. And case stories are actually a description of difficult situations that are presented to you in a simplified way. So, if you have the cases that you're working with in the afternoon, they're based on real life stories, so they're based on real organizations and real problems, but they have been written down to make them easier to do and to make them also characteristic so that you can work with specific problems and specific models. The case that you're working with the challenge or the mobile life that you read last week, these are also real case problems, and they are a bit more complicated than the cases you work with in the first part of the course, because they are not written by teachers to make you spot the problem, but they're actually the way they are in reality. So you have a simplified case that is put down on paper, but that includes all the complexity that you, or some of the complexity that you have in real life organizations. So what you need to do is to work with both the cases in the afternoon and then the case in the challenge to try to spot the problem and then analyze its causes. We have 4 case stories for the sandpit. We might change it to sandbox next semester, but for this semester you're stuck with this term. For the sandpit, we have 4 cases. Today you will work with the taste of wine, which is about a company that's called Milkfoss. And it will allow you to work with the models that you have worked with last week and this week. So every week, every case is actually dedicated to the curriculum for that week so that you can spot the problems and the theories to work with in a bit of an easier way. So when we're working with case analysis, last time we gave you there was a slide, or we presented a slide with the different things that you can do to support your understanding and your solving of the problem. And basically what you do, you start by skimming the problem and getting an overview, an idea of what this situation could be. Then you read it again more thoroughly, taking precise notes, and you try to map the overall situation. Then you look into the information that are given to you in the case. So if there are information about the market, then they need to be reflected in your report, so that your report is actually fitting the real situation. And then you look for information that are not included in the report. So if you're working with a competitive advantage problem, and you're saying that there is, that the competitors are picking up, we would really like to see who these competitors are, even if they are not put down in the report. So what you do is you start Googling and you start looking online for who are the competitors of the company you're working with. Then you apply the theories and models, and remember to argue for why you are choosing these models and how they fit together. And always show the evidence and the reasoning behind it. So it's not just about what you think is right, but how does it work according to the theory. And then finally, you develop an implementation plan, thinking what would this solution mean for the organization I'm working with, and which recommendation would I take. And another thing that we strongly, that is very important for us, is the use of references. So if you're using a model, put down or write down the author and the book and the page so that we know where you took it from. Because if you're just saying strategy is important and the company should have a good strategy, if you put a reference to the STAR model, then is acceptable. It's not the very best sentence because it's something that everybody can say. But if you don't even put the reference down, then we don't know if you're just saying that because you heard it on the street or because you actually studied the curriculum and understood what it means to have a good strategy. The best way to do this is that you actually explain what a good strategy means and how to work with it. So, next step, after you've read the case twice and you've taken notes, is try to understand what the key problem and the key problem owner is. And when you do your report, we would like to have a part where you're actually telling us, this is the key problem we're going to work with, and this is the key problem owner. And the key problem is a critical and threatening situation that the company finds itself in, to which they need to find a solution if they want to remain successful or to become successful. The key problem owner is not always the CEO, but is the person or the level of the organization that has the power to do something about that problem. So if the problem is that our frontline or our research and development engineers are not motivated, so they have very low performance, the key problem owner is not the CEO, but is actually the frontline manager who is working with these employees and who needs to motivate them to do a better job. Then this is a crucial part, because if you have identified the wrong problem or wrong problem owner, then it's actually really difficult to propose the right solution, and it's really difficult to keep a coherence across your report. So, if we go back to the examples that we did this morning, one way that you can identify the key problem is that you use the business model canvas. So what you do is you map all the different elements of the business model of the company you are working with, and you try to see, is there a mismatch? Are we selling, in the case of TDC, for example, are we selling them the infrastructure and access to Netflix, and our customer is retired people that don't really know how to use a smartphone? There it's very evident that there is a problem in the business model canvas or in the business model of the company, and then you can take it as a starting point for your analysis. Another way to identify the key problem is by using the value proposition. So if you take the Sunday case, for example, that you worked with last week, or the mobile life case, when we look at the pains and the gains and the customer jobs, I actually had a pair discussion for this, but I think we're running out of time, so I'm just going to tell you. We also understood from the feedback that it was not completely clear how to work with the mobile life case. So basically what they did with the Sunday app is to say, when our customers are buying a house, when our customers are buying a house, they have certain pains. There are certain things that they don't like, such as working with trying to find out if they can get a mortgage, searching for a house, and then figuring out all the financial aspects around buying a house. And when they are in this process, some of the gains that they would like to have is they would like to have a process that it's easier. They have a very fragmented process, so they would like it to be easier to buy a house. The customer job is, of course, buying, selling, or improving your house before you're selling it. So what they did was provide a product in the Sunday that would allow you to find out if your mortgage, if you could get a mortgage and how much it would be. Then they integrated it with the search, so you could only look for houses that you could actually afford. And then the point was you could actually just swipe your phone and buy the house. Now, on paper, the value proposition is quite good. They looked at the pains, the gains, and the customer jobs, and they created something that could solve the pain, that could give some gains, and that would allow the customer to do their customer job, buying a house, just by swiping on your phone. But if you look at the business model around it, first of all, how many people want to buy a house by swiping on their phone? Is it, you know, it's something that takes a little bit more thinking. So the whole process is actually very supported, but the way they would make money is just in the moment you swipe, because that's when they get the transaction fee. So maybe you're using the app all the way, and then you're not swiping, so then they're not making any money. Even if you were willing to make the swipe, how many times do you buy a house? How many money can they make with this? And on top of it, it's only for the Danske Bank customers, because if you're a customer of another bank, then it doesn't work. You can just swipe. So what's happening here is that they have the right value proposition, but the wrong business model. So the way to work with this case, in this perspective, is you could have done an analysis of the value proposition and say, it looks good, but there's still some problems. Let's look at the business model. Then you would have done the business model, and then you would have identified, okay, we have limited potential revenues, and then we have a problem in the business model. And then this could have been a problem to focus on. Similarly, another way to work with problems is the efficiency effectiveness model that you had to read, or that we explained last week, where the idea is organizational performance is about how efficient you are in producing your products and putting them to market, and how effective you are in satisfying your customers. So doing the right things and doing things right. So reading the mobile life case, at the beginning, you have a lot of things about the organization. So if you chose to focus on that aspect, so on the organizational performance, what you could have done is say, okay, are they efficient And by the way they describe the case, it seems like they're very efficient because they have a very fast process, they're very good at innovating and putting new things out. But are they effective? Are they producing something that the customers want to buy? Maybe not so much. Even if you look at the mobile pay case, which is very popular and very successful in a way, a lot of people are using it, but they're still not making any money out of it. So you could have said, okay, on paper, if we look at this model, it looks like they are very efficient and very effective with the mobile pay, very efficient, not so effective with the Sunday. But if we then look at the business model, there are some problems there again. So can you see the link between the models and the theories? Another way to do this, and we will go back to it next week, is you can do a SWOT analysis. So you can say, okay, we have information about the internal organization and we have information about the competitive situation and the external environment. Where can we spot the problem? So you look, you make an internal analysis and you look what are the strengths and the weaknesses of our company, what works, what doesn't work. And then you look at the external environment and you see what are the opportunities and what are the threats. And the opportunities in the case of Sunday could be, for example, could be the digitalization, and that's what they tell you themselves in the case. But a big threat is companies like Google, like Facebook, that could actually come in and take that part of the market by providing a product that the customers want faster than Danske Bank. But we will go back to the SWOT. Once you have identified the key problem, you need to spot the key problem owner. And one way to do this is to take the model where you have the different levels and place the problem at one of the levels. So as I said before, if your problem is, I have very unmotivated engineers, so they're not innovative, they're not creating new products, your key problem owner will be the first line manager because the problem is an operational one. While if we're talking about the Sunday, and if the problem is that we know that the market is digitalizing and we need to digitalize before other companies do, then you are at the strategic level, and in that case you will work with the CEO and the top management as your key problem owner. But this is a way to combine the key problem with the key problem owner. So once you've done this, you need to do the causal analysis. And then you need to see, okay, what kind of insight do we need for this problem, and how can we support our analysis of causes with models and theories. And so then you connect the data with your theory, and you make an analysis and you explain why this is a problem and why it arose. Once you've done that, you answer the same questions with one difference, that your models and theories are here supporting your proposed solution. So your solution also needs to be supported by a new business model canvas, for example, or by a new value proposition canvas, where you explain, these were the old elements and these are the new ones. One thing that is important is that once you have proposed a solution, you need to consider the implementation. And we can't say this often enough. You have an internal organization, you have an external environment. You have organizational performance and competitive advantage. If you're working with one, it will have an impact on the other. So you need to keep a balance, and in your implementation plan, you can, for example, apply this model to see how can I balance it out. How can I balance my changes out in the other aspect of my organization. I'm almost done. Finally, sometimes you need to make assumptions because you don't have information about a specific aspect of the company that you need to work with. And in that case, you say, I assume that we will grow 5% in the next 5 years. Very random assumption, if you don't know the context. But what you need to do is, if you have that assumption, at the end you make a robustness check and you say, what happens to my solution if that assumption is wrong? If we don't grow 5% in the next 5 years, what happens to my solution? Is it still valid or is it not? And another important thing is that if you can find the information online, it's not really right to make an assumption. So you can't say that your competitors are, you cannot assume who your competitors are. You need to make a market analysis and tell us who the competitors are and how the market is developing. So the presentation is the one that we presented last time, so with the different parts in the report, and you can go back to this in your slides. So, very quickly, we're not going to do the pair discussion, but do you have any doubts or is anything missing at this point? Yeah, the mic is on the back. Can we have the mic?
Yes.
Or just say it and then I repeat it. Okay. Man down.
Okay.
Yes.
Relate to your slides, you have a case analysis that you point out from facts you have to come to conclusions.
Yes.
Or a solution. Still, I am missing, you need a provable system that if you go to all these steps of management, so you can prove that all these facts relate to your solutions consistent with your proof system.
Yes. But that's your work, that's what you do in the report. You show how the facts are connected to each other and how they support your solution.
That's what you look at.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. And now we take a break. We have another question, yes?
Between organization and environmental fit and not only inside the business.
Can you say it again?
Yeah.
I'm not.
Well, I was wondering why we're using only models like SWOT analysis or, for example, PEST, that they are organization environmental fit and not also model for the internal alignment.
Because that's what we will do the next weeks.
Ah, okay.
Yes. So we will go through the models that look at the internal aspects of the organization. We will do this in the third and the fourth lecture, or fourth and fifth lecture, so when they are associated with the last two talk shows. So not next week is business model again, and then we go to the internal organization. So now we have 10 minutes break until 11, and then at 11 sharp, we start with our talk show. Thank you. 10, not 11, at 10, sorry.